Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Baradell, and I work with Idea Grove, which is an agency that has had the pleasure to work with BigLever, uh, innovative company in the field of product line engineering. And right now, with me in studio, in the StreamYard studio, is Charlie Krueger, Dr. Charles Krueger, who is the founder and CEO of BigLever to tell us more about what he does and what BigLever does. Thank you for joining me in studio.
Oh, you bet. Thank you, Scott.
So tell me a little bit about, if you could. I know that this is a complex topic that not everyone, probably a very small percentage of people on the planet, know what product line engineering is. Probably maybe a minority of engineers. I don't know, but there's certainly a lot of business people and a lot of businesses that could benefit from product line engineering that would be great if they learned more about it. So if you could sum it up in a few words, what would you say product line engineering is?
Okay, good. What we are focused on is helping organizations who, they're engineering organizations and they build complex products. So things like airplanes or medical devices or home appliances. But it's the engineers who actually design and figure out how to create these things. And so what we're doing is providing technology and methodology. It's an approach that changes how organizations do their engineering activity to better support the engineering of a family of products or systems, and ultimately just make the engineers more efficient in order to take best advantage of your skilled engineering staff so that they're not doing low value repetitive work, high degrees of automation and taking away a lot of mundane activities from the engineers.
You've been a pioneer in this space from really the time you were a PhD student. Can you talk about what originally years ago kind of led you in this direction of being interested in it, passionate about it, and really becoming a lifelong advocate for it?
So in my graduate study days, I was intrigued by this idea of what was called software reuse. How can you take something you've built before that works really well, a little piece of software, and say, well, next time somebody needs that, why don't I store that somewhere on a shelf, like a book that says, oh, I'll just take that and reuse it instead of writing it again from scratch. So that was a nice concept. We started looking for my PhD work at, well, not taking little pieces of software. What happens if you take the entire software architecture for a system, a really big thing? How much of that could we reuse and leverage? So came up with some interesting ideas there. Of course, it's theoretical, but nice foundations, and it seemed promising. My first job out of graduate school was in the telecommunications market when the wireless networks were just, cellular phones were just coming into popularity. And so we applied some of the concepts from my thesis, and all of a sudden tripled the output of an engineering organization. Me and another engineer worked for about 6 months on some technology. And it's like, oh my gosh, we just, tripled the output of 100-person engineering team. That was surprising. I spent a couple of years thinking about what caused that to occur and took those really best ideas from that experience and turned it into a company about 23 years ago.
What were you doing immediately before? Did you have a job before you were full-time student, or did you go straight from Carnegie Mellon into BigLever?
Coming out of undergraduate school, I actually went to work in a research lab doing chemistry, physics, math, those kinds of topics. But I got a computer in the lab, one of the refrigerator-sized computers that did about the same level of sophistication as a handheld calculator these days. But I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And so I would spend most of my time working on the computer instead of working on my chemistry experiments.
Right.
Um, and so ultimately, it's like I want to go back and really become good at doing this computer thing.
And I know that um, you've been a speaker on the topic and advocate for it ever since you realized, its potential. Um, in terms of how it's evolved and progressed since you initially became passionate about it, what would you say are some of the biggest triumphs for PLE to date, as well as maybe some opportunities that you think, gosh, companies they still don't get it, or they still haven't taken advantage of it?
So if you look at some of the case studies and the metrics that have come out of this, it's not hyperbolic to call this a breakthrough. We're able to oftentimes double and triple the output of an entire engineering team. And the last time we saw that was when people realized if we create software languages, today there's C and C++ and other Java, languages like that. But back in the day, people used to program in ones and zeros. When somebody came up with the idea of programming languages, it kind of quadrupled the output of engineers doing that kind of work. Well, doubling and tripling, we haven't seen that level of improvement in engineering approaches since, that's 1960s, 1970s. I mean, this is a big deal. So really, when I see this, I still get goosebumps when an organization is able to achieve those levels of improvement. So you would think, everybody would be lined up at the front door of our organization saying, "Oh my gosh, I want a piece of that." Um, the challenge that we face in the product line industry is getting people to slow down, think of doing something different. It change, product line engineering changes the way people work. People resist change. And so our biggest challenge right now is getting this to become a very standardized, matter of fact, mainstream approach. And right now, some organizations still feel like it's too much of a chasm to jump over. So,
Would you describe it as what this is a term that's used by every company in Silicon Valley to the point where it's kind of become meaningless, but as Clayton Christensen initially defined this concept of a disruptive technology, that kind of comes up and it looks like it's a non-starter, or it looks so foreign to what everybody else is doing that are looking at incremental technology improvements, that once it overtakes an industry, it can be a big surprise. Would you say that in terms of the adoption of product line engineering, that it's more of a something where it's incremental, even though it might be a big change within an organization, or it's more of that kind of turning upside down kind of disruption for companies in terms of how they might think about it when it's pitched to them?
yeah. So it does look big to an organization when we sit down and say, well, here's where you are today. Here's where you might be, in the big shiny, new place that you might live in the future. Um, it seems like a big distance, but the benefits again are so enormous um, that people are intrigued by it. So what we have done here at BigLever is find those incremental ways. Take a small step next Monday that takes you, one step further down the path. You don't have to, jump off the cliff and do it all at once. Do it incrementally and do it in ways that organizations can absorb. But it does impact most parts of an engineering organization, and that's a lot of change. People don't love. Well, I'll say a lot of people don't love change. There's 20% of people that always want to try something new. There's 20% of people who would, rather die than change, from what they're doing today. And then there are the 60% in the middle that, you got to convince them that this is a good thing to do.
Without giving away anything that's confidential, can you describe an example, maybe an inspiring story for people in business about an important change that PLE has brought to a company?
Yeah, the ones I really like, people come to us with, a business opportunity, right? There's something happening, and if we can achieve, these certain benefits, it will enable us to impact the market, you know, get ahead of a competitor, make a customer really happy. So there are a couple of really nice ones. I can speak to one that's quite public. It's in the Army training system. So these are very sophisticated training sites for training soldiers in missions and whatnot. So they might have laser tag vests or simulated combat situations that they're doing. And so General Dynamics about 10 years ago, responded to a request by the Army to get better at producing these systems. There's maybe 300 or more of these sites around the world for doing training. And so over the course of 12 years or so, General Dynamics has shown, and the Government Accounting Office has validated, that they have eliminated almost $1 billion, that's with a B, dollars of unnecessary redundant effort doing this compared to what they would have been doing before. So that's $1 billion in, tax dollars that are not being spent on doing really low value work. And now you're using that money to improve capabilities and introduce new training sites. Those kinds of things are what tell you PLE is a thing that's going to happen. Eventually, everybody's going to do it, because if you don't, you can't compete against organizations who are providing that much value.
I know that you've really worked to find ways to kind of ease companies into it, but in the case you just gave, how long did that implementation take to put the
So,
system in place?
right, right. So during the proposal process, we built a proof of concept, helped them show that they could take a system. Uh, they had sort of three different flavors, variants, three members of a product line. They, put them into this product line approach. And so that was, I'll say maybe a month or two of, staff effort to produce that. And it actually, reduced their code base by 2/3, eliminated, thousands and thousands of lines of software, just showed the benefit. And so you could call that, after a month or two of effort, well, that was their first step into the journey. And then we go into these incremental steps to move forward. So, you could say it maybe took them a year to get a fairly significant footprint established. And then it kind of goes forever, and it improves and expands, and opportunities are being discovered all the time to benefit from it. So it's a continuous journey. Maybe our fastest deployment, somebody from first contact, first concept, to going live and producing something out of the approach was about 60 days. So it's possible to move very quickly if you're so inspired to do so.
Who is most common within an organization to identify the need and reach out, and why, and also what industries tend to be more prone to say, "Wow, this could really help us"?
Yeah, good question. So we tend to find there are a pair of people that, if we get this pair of roles working together, then an organization will be successful. So some sort of a lead technical person, like a chief engineer, a chief architect, somebody who's got change authority and is respected by the technical organization. They're the ones that can say we need to make this change in the way that we work, and then their um, comrade on the business side, typically a VP or a senior director, says we need to do this in order to achieve some business objective. And so sometimes it's the VP will come to us and say, I've got a business problem. I'd like to, go after a market segment or beat a competitor or whatever we're going to do, take over the world. They'll reach out to their technical counterpart, or sometimes the technical person will say, we're dying. Our business side is unhappy with what we're doing in engineering. I need some help. And then they will reach out, once we get started, to get connected with their people on the business side. So typically the business people are, selling up, the technical people are selling down, and that is sufficient to move an entire organization.
Is as something that often is initiated within the tech folks, and as a technology that can reduce by 2/3 the amount of time and effort it takes to do something. Are there ever concerns about, oh, this is going to cost people jobs, and how do you address that question?
We used to hear that more than we hear it now. Typically, the backlog of work to do is so big. What we're doing is shifting engineers from doing low value work into high value work.
Yeah, these are not the people who have the hardest time finding a job, right?
Right, right,
So if you can, they're high value folks that and are hard to find, and so if you can, and that's why there's such a backlog. So if you can get them focused on the things that make them think more or more strategic, it probably increases their job satisfaction.
correct,
In addition to, we all know that when we have backlogs or things that we know we have to get done that we don't have time to do, that creates this kind of latent stress that's always there. So there's probably a lot of psychological and benefits in terms of just morale and motivation and things like that for a team that kind of gets this boost.
correct. You're more likely, if your team is using an inefficient product line approach, and people are frustrated and engineers are doing a lot of low value work to keep moving things forward, you're more likely to lose people that way out of frustration with their job than the concern about, oh my gosh, if we're so efficient, we're going to have to lay people off. I mean, that we've never seen that happen.
Right.
I'll just put it that way. So your risk is very low of somehow running out of things to do in an engineering organization.
What in terms of the investment versus the kind of the time to recoup that investment, what does that typically look like? I'm sure it varies a lot based on the project and the industry.
So using this incremental approach, we, very early on recognized the need to do this. So we call it incremental return on incremental investment, right? So imagine you have a huge engineering team and it's like, oh, all this stuff has to change. Think of it more as, I'm going to take 5 of my people who are working on a particular thing, and I'm going to move 5 people this week or this month, and they will start working under this new paradigm. And these 5 people, by the end of a month, are going to be producing 3 times as much as they were before. So you make that investment, but you fairly quickly, in a matter of weeks or small number of months, these people are more productive. And so now with that increased output, you can have that team, maybe helping the next team of 5 or 10 people move. And so you make these investments, but it's short investment and short time to return, and it's little bitty steps. So one of our very first, big customers where we had, hundreds of engineers eventually working under this approach, they measured their, input and their output, but basically over the course of 9 months, you could incrementally see their output of their organization up, 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 up. And at 9 months, they were triple from where they were before. But this happened in little bitty steps, not one giant big bang. After 9 months, we've invested all this stuff and now we see the investment. There's very nice linear increase in output. And so that's absolutely the approach that's required to.
So if you can, in other words, you can have a customer who says, I'm not sure about this. It sounds like it could be a really big deal, but I don't want to take any chances. You could have something that where you're implementing it, able to show a return quantitatively to justify further investment in less than a year.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of our offerings here, we call it Getting Started Package. And so we'll come in and basically spend a week with a small engineering team. And it's a kind of proof of concept, it's experimental, but it's enough hands-on work in the context of what these people do in their day job, where at the end of a week, they can sort of push the I believe button. It's like, I get it. I got my hands dirty. I see how it works. I can envision what this might look like going forward. And, they can push that I believe button and tell the managers, I think we should do this. The next step, we typically say invest 3 months to create a minimum viable implementation, really take it closer to production. But, spend 3 months for a, team of people. Maybe it's the 5 or 10 people I was talking about earlier. And then after that, start to increment from there. So at each point, you can say, well, you invest a little bit. If you think you hate it at the end of that, then you can, push the abort button instead of the I believe button. We never see people do that, but it's a way of slowly investing a little, building confidence, taking the next step, building confidence without feeling like if I make this decision, I'm locked in, and if it fails, this will destroy my career or my life, right? It's just take some steps, slowly, incrementally prove it out.
And yeah, that's great. So what industries have already taken the most interest in PLE, and which ones do you think there's the biggest opportunity but haven't quite caught on to how it might help them yet?
As a small company here at BigLever, we bootstrapped the company, and we're not a huge organization, so it's always been a challenge and a bit surprising that some of our customers are, General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, General Motors, NetApp, these companies, really huge organizations who, are willing to take this approach, work with us as a small company and move forward. So we've seen, large automotive, computer system, avionics, defense programs. We're seeing a lot of interest now from commercial space. Everybody's, finding ways to, send out different things up into space for different purposes, but a lot of that is being done as product lines. And so they're wanting to take advantage of the efficiencies here to make commercialization possible. Home appliances are good. Medical devices, we've seen some interest. So pretty much everywhere we look, if anybody's engineering a product, if they're doing it as a product line, nobody builds just one, is our little motto here. So it's universally applicable, we see, but typically the really complex systems is where this started, and now we're seeing it approach more into things like home appliances and things with maybe less complexity and sophistication.
Well, I know that the most obvious benefits to using PLE would be efficiency, getting things done faster. What's the benefit of PLE as it relates to kind of the end quality of the product that's produced?
That's huge. We've seen some organizations reduce their defect density by 80%. I mean, a lot. And this comes about from the fact that uh, you really consolidate anything that's common. Let's share it across all of our products. So if I fix a defect for one product because it's in something that's shared across all my products, everybody benefits it. So we talk about, you find a bug once, you fix it once, everybody benefits. And so that is where the opportunity for this product line approach and sharing and reuse, it is a multiplier, right? And so it's a huge benefit that all organizations see when they do this.
I'm sure that that all the industries you spoke of and on all the engineering teams are always looking for ways to do things better and faster and cheaper. Um, when they're looking around, what are some options that maybe are being chosen now as ways to speed things up or to make things more efficient that maybe you look at and you say, well, that's fine, but PLE would be a better solution?
Our biggest competitor is status quo. So we're,
Hmm.
we're not introducing the idea of you should build a product line. You've never thought of that before. You
Right.
know, most organizations have been building product lines for decades. Um, so what we're doing is saying, here's a way to engineer your product line in a way that's so much more efficient, high quality, uh, faster, scalable than anything that you've done before. Now, one thing that is happening today is people are hearing about this. So other engineering tool vendors hear us talking about this, and we partner with a lot of them. But they will say, "Oh, I'm just going to build something into my particular tool that supports the product line and the variation in my particular part of the engineering life cycle." What this does, it creates silos. And if you have 5 tools you're using to get your products out the door, if you have 5 different product line approaches in all these tools and they don't interact, it's a serious problem. And so what we are saying is, have a single authoritative source of truth in a single place. That's what we do, so that you don't end up with these silos that are not communicating and interconnecting well. And that's a kind of a big risk right now that people don't understand, that might be creating them problems in the future.
That's interesting. And when you think in technology in general and B2B tech, there's so much discussion in terms of how to make things faster around artificial intelligence. I'm wondering if where AI comes into the picture in the spaces that you're part of and where the intersection might be there.
We haven't seen a lot yet. Sometimes we think about organizations that have these, um, existing content. Been building product lines and been doing it again for maybe a long time. Is there a way we could apply some level of automation and AI to help them sort of move, into this new approach? And again, we don't have any great examples of that yet. So
Well, there's always going to be the next thing to work on, Charlie.
yes, I know. We seem to never run out of a shortage of interesting new innovations to build into this approach.
Yeah, well, that's one of the great things about having something that has been a passion of yours for so long that you've helped so many organizations with. Um, we're going to be doing a number of these that we'll be posting on the productlineengineering.com website and sharing on social to get the word out more about product line engineering and its benefits. Also, some interesting stories about it. We'll talk a little history and things like that. But to wrap up today, not to put you on the spot, but on the lighter side, are there any kind of fun facts or anything, jokes or anything that you could share about PLE for those just starting to learn about it?
Mm. Yeah, here's one I came across recently. So why is Greta Thunberg so interested in product line engineering? She likes the amount of reusable content.
Okay, yes, we'll just tie right into that whole sustainability story. I like that. Well, Charlie, thank you for taking the time. It's been about a half hour, so we'll stop here, but continue the conversation later. This has been very informative, I know, for me, and I'm sure for everybody who's been listening in.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott.